It's hard to miss what is happening today. Modern women are shattering under the smallest pressures while blaming everything except their own decisions. And you do not need to search hard for proof. It appears the moment you open your phone. You see a woman crying in her SUV because daycare costs more than her paycheck. Another sits in the grocery store parking lot, recording herself after breaking down over the price of basic food. Someone else films a late-night confession from her kitchen floor, exhausted by a sick child and a sink full of dishes. Different women, different moments, yet the same collapse repeats over and over. What makes this so striking is how ordinary these situations are. None of them are major disasters. They are the basic responsibilities every adult must face. Bills that never pause. Children who need care at inconvenient hours. Long workdays that drain energy. Unplanned problems that require calm solutions. Generations before us handled these tasks quietly and consistently. No spotlight, no panic, no emotional broadcast. So the real question is simple. Why do the same responsibilities that once defined adulthood now feel unbearable for so many modern women? Why does a flat tire register as trauma? Why does a child's fever create a meltdown? Why does an ordinary Tuesday feel impossible? It starts with a shift in the story they were taught. Independence became a slogan. Strength became an aesthetic. And the belief that you can do everything alone replaced the truth about what real life demands. If you want to understand how this mindset formed and why it is cracking so fast, stay with me as we move into the next part. The cracks you see today did not appear overnight. They began forming years ago when a very specific message started spreading. Women were told that independence was not just empowering, but effortless. They were taught that walking away from stability was a sign of strength. The story sounded inspiring. The reality was very different. A lot of modern women grew up hearing that commitment was optional and that emotional discomfort was a valid reason to leave any situation. If a relationship felt boring, they could leave. If a man was stable but not exciting, they could upgrade. If life with a good partner required patience and teamwork, they could choose freedom instead. The promise was simple. Life will feel better once you are on your own. And for a moment, it does feel like that. The first few weeks of independence always look beautiful. A new apartment, quiet evenings, no compromises, no one to disagree with, no one to keep accountable. But comfort without structure never lasts long. Eventually, real life arrives with the responsibilities that used to be shared. The bills do not shrink. The car still breaks down. Kids still get sick. Groceries still cost money. The tasks that a partner quietly handled in the background suddenly land entirely on one set of shoulders. And that is when many women realize something they were never prepared for. Independence is not freedom. Independence is responsibility without backup. This is where the collapse begins. A woman who once had a reliable partner now faces every problem alone. The things he took care of become problems she must learn on the fly. The emotional support she once dismissed feels painfully missing. The structure she claimed she did not need becomes the very thing she now struggles to recreate. The tragedy is that most of these women did not leave abusive homes or toxic men. Many walked away from stable, functioning lives because they believed there was something better waiting just outside the relationship. They never expected that the life they were chasing required more discipline and resilience than they had ever practiced. In the next part, we will look at what happens when daily responsibilities pile up on someone who never developed the skills to carry them alone. When the excitement of independence fades, real life steps in without hesitation. And real life is relentless. It does not wait for you to be rested or emotionally ready. It does not soften its demands just because you chose to start over. It comes with bills, repairs, schedules, deadlines, and responsibilities that pile up whether you want them or not. For many modern women, this is where the fantasy of freedom collides with reality. The tasks that once felt invisible suddenly become the entire day. A simple grocery run becomes a struggle when a toddler throws a tantrum in the cereal aisle. A routine doctor visit becomes overwhelming when you have to carry a sick child, sign paperwork, manage work calls, and keep it all together alone. A broken faucet or a flashing check engine light turns into a full emotional crisis because there is no one else to step in. These problems are not new. They are the same challenges families have dealt with for generations. The difference is that previous generations built their resilience before the responsibilities arrived. They respected partnership. They understood that a functioning household requires more than feelings and independence slogans. It requires teamwork, planning, sacrifice, and consistency. Without that foundation, every inconvenience feels like a disaster. A normal Tuesday begins to feel like an avalanche. The woman who once insisted she did not need anyone suddenly feels crushed by tasks she never had to handle alone. Even small disruptions become overwhelming because she lacks the support system and daily structure that make adult life manageable. This growing pressure leads to emotional overload. That is why so many women turn to their phones the moment something goes wrong. A camera becomes the outlet. A meltdown becomes content. The comment section becomes the comfort they can no longer find in their real lives. The crisis is not the flat tire or the unpaid bill. The crisis is the lack of internal and external stability needed to solve it calmly. And what comes next reveals the breaking point most clearly, because nothing exposes these cracks faster than the moment a woman must carry all of this while raising a child alone. When a woman becomes the sole parent in a household, every pressure that once felt manageable suddenly becomes heavier. Raising a child is demanding, even with two adults sharing the load. Doing it alone, without support or structure, turns everyday responsibilities into an exhausting cycle with no pause button. A child changes the entire rhythm of a home. They need routine. They need stability. They need an adult who can stay calm when they are scared and stay firm when they push boundaries. When one person is forced to play every role, fatigue sets in quickly. A sick child means there is no opportunity to rest. A school meeting means rearranging an entire workday. A tantrum at bedtime means being both the comforting parent and the disciplinarian at the same time. These moments stack up until even small problems feel like they carry the weight of an entire week. Many single mothers never expected to be in this position. Some chose partners who were exciting but unreliable. Others left stable homes believing that a fresh start would feel liberating. No matter how they arrived here, the reality rarely matches the fantasy. The responsibilities they once shared are now entirely theirs. The emotional support that used to come from a partner is gone, and the discipline required to keep everything running smoothly becomes harder to maintain when exhaustion is constant. Teachers often see the consequences before anyone else. They meet the child who arrives late because mornings are chaotic. They notice the one who is tired because bedtime has no structure. They observe behavioral patterns shaped not by lack of love, but by a household stretched thin and running on survival mode. In many cases, the child becomes the silent witness to a life that is overwhelmed, reactive, and perpetually one step behind. Single motherhood is not a failure, but it exposes every missing piece of preparation. It reveals how much stability, teamwork, and emotional resilience a functioning household actually requires. And it shows how quickly things unravel when one person is forced to carry everything alone. As the pressure builds, many women look for an outlet, and the easiest one sits right in their hand. A phone becomes the place to release frustration, to confess stress, to seek validation, and to feel understood for a moment. What used to be a private struggle now turns into a public performance, not always because they want attention, but because they have nowhere else to put the weight they are carrying. This is how emotional expression slowly shifts into emotional display. Instead of calming down and solving the problem, the instinct becomes recording it. A flat tire triggers a video. A messy apartment becomes a confession clip. A child's bad day turns into shaky footage of a mother breaking down. The camera offers instant comfort, a digital audience ready to say, "You are doing your best." And in that brief moment, it feels like support. But the comfort is temporary. Social media rewards vulnerability with sympathy and engagement, not stability or solutions. A crying video might receive thousands of encouraging comments, yet none of those comments pay the bills, repair the car, set boundaries for the child, or build the resilience needed to handle tomorrow's responsibilities. The emotional release becomes a cycle that feels therapeutic, but reinforces helplessness. This culture also sets a dangerous comparison trap. When women scroll and see others sharing their struggles, the behavior becomes normalized. When they see emotional breakdowns go viral, the incentive grows stronger. And when sympathy comes easier than accountability, expressing hardship starts to feel more rewarding than fixing it. The real challenge is that emotional broadcasting slowly replaces emotional regulation. Instead of processing feelings internally or leaning on real-life support, the instinct becomes externalizing everything to an audience. The screen becomes the listener, the comments become the comfort, and the ability to hold steady through stress becomes weaker over time. This shift does not make women weaker as individuals, but it does weaken their relationship with reality. It teaches them to express the pain, not resolve its source. It offers temporary relief without long-term strength. And when life keeps sending problems, temporary relief is never enough. The more life demands structure, the more obvious it becomes who never learned how to create it. Many modern women were raised to prioritize how they feel rather than what needs to be done. This was never intentional harm, but it produced a generation that struggles with the most basic pillars of adulthood: discipline, planning, and accountability. When someone has never built consistent habits, even simple routines feel overwhelming. Budgeting becomes a crisis because spending has no rules. Health becomes unpredictable because sleep and food choices fluctuate with emotion. Daily tasks pile up because there is no schedule to contain them. Without structure, life becomes a series of emergencies that were avoidable from the start. This is where accountability becomes a sensitive subject. Instead of asking, "What can I do differently?" the reaction often becomes, "Who or what made this harder for me?" The blame shifts in circles. It lands on the ex-partner who left, the job that doesn't pay enough, the friend who doesn't help, the family who is unavailable, or the economy that is too harsh. All of these factors may influence the situation, but none of them hold the solution. Responsibility is rarely comfortable. It requires confronting choices that did not age well. It requires admitting patterns that need to be corrected. Most of all, it requires accepting that life will not adjust itself to your emotions. Without that acceptance, everything feels unfair, and every bump becomes a personal attack. Poor habits only amplify the problem. Overspending creates financial panic every month. Procrastination turns minor tasks into major stress. Avoiding difficult conversations creates relationship instability. Ignoring small problems allows them to grow into larger ones. When these patterns continue long enough, chaos becomes the baseline. Over time, this lifestyle creates an emotional state where normal responsibilities feel impossible. The smallest inconvenience triggers panic. Simple decisions feel complicated. Challenges that require calm thinking spark frustration instead. It is not that these women cannot handle life. It is that they never learned the skills that make life manageable. And when discipline is absent and accountability feels threatening, reality becomes harder with every passing day. While all of this is unfolding, there is another perspective that rarely gets acknowledged. Men watch these situations with a mix of confusion, frustration, and resignation. They see the struggle, and many have lived through similar pressure themselves, often with far less sympathy. Yet the reaction they receive from society is very different. A man who admits he is overwhelmed is told to be stronger. A man who struggles financially is mocked or dismissed. A man who expresses stress is labeled weak. Support for him is minimal, and expectations are absolute. This double standard does not only affect men, it reshapes the dynamics of families and influences the children growing up inside them. When a woman collapses under the weight of daily responsibilities, the first person to feel that instability is usually her child. Kids absorb chaos quickly. They sense tension. They recognize when a parent is stretched too thin. They learn to tiptoe around stress, to manage emotions that are not theirs, and to adapt to unpredictable environments. Teachers see the impact long before anyone else mentions it. A child who arrives at school tired is often coming from a home with no structure. A child who lacks focus frequently comes from a place where routines fall apart. A child who acts out is often reflecting the emotional instability they witness daily. None of this is because single mothers do not love their children. It is because love alone cannot replace the structure and balance that a stable partnership provides. Meanwhile, men who want to support their children often find themselves shut out or viewed with suspicion. They carry the financial burden. They try to stay involved, yet they receive none of the recognition that struggling mothers get. When they express concern about the household or the child's behavior, they are accused of criticizing or controlling. Their effort becomes invisible, and their frustration grows. Over time, these dynamics create a silent consequence. Boys learn that men are expected to endure without complaint. Girls learn that emotional overwhelm is normal. Both grow up without consistently seeing how healthy partnership works. A society cannot thrive on that model, and the effects show long before adulthood arrives. The truth behind all of this is simpler than it looks. Modern life didn't suddenly become harder. The demands didn't change. What changed was the preparation. Many women were encouraged to chase freedom without being taught the discipline that makes freedom sustainable. They were told to trust their feelings, but not taught how to steady themselves when those feelings turn chaotic. And when real responsibility arrived, the gap between expectation and reality hit like a wall. Strength was never meant to be a slogan. Independence was never meant to be a performance. Both require structure, resilience, and accountability. Without them, even ordinary days feel unbearable. With them, the same challenges become manageable, even meaningful. Some women recognize this and rebuild themselves from the inside out. They stop broadcasting struggle and start strengthening the habits that hold their lives together. And once they do, everything improves. The chaos quiets. Their children stabilize. Life becomes something they can shape rather than something that crushes them. Others stay locked in the same cycle, waiting for life to soften instead of learning to grow stronger. And that is the dividing line. Not gender, not circumstance, just the willingness to rise to the reality in front of you. If you've seen this pattern in real life, or lived through it yourself, share your thoughts. Your story might be the perspective someone else needs to finally see their own clearly.